Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
And that voice you've heard is Mr. Rob Carless. Rob, is that your real name, Carless?
It is.
That's a fabulous name. I mean, I would say where'd you get it from, but obviously your parents and your history is back in the great city of Birmingham. I know you don't live there now, but let's a little bit before we start the podcast, because we're here to talk about your first book, 3 games in May, Manchester United when they won the treble. But let's talk about you, Rob Carless, growing up in Birmingham first. How you got involved in writing books?
Thanks, Paul. So the way I got into this was I've been watching football since around 1972, 1970. I was taken to Villa games during those times. Can't remember them very well, but really started to get into them about 74, 75 season. And that's when the Villa was in the second division. And we were vying for top spot with Manchester United. Now,
Nice.
my dad had told me that Man United were one of the biggest clubs in the world. And I'm thinking, why are they in Division 2?
Because we put them there.
Correct. Or part of the reason as to why. It just, I loved that Villa Man United thing. And it was very prevalent in that mid-70s period. And at school, I wanted to be a journalist, and I wrote school articles. And I interviewed Ron Atkinson when he was first manager of West Brom back in 79, 80. And it was published in the school magazine. But then, you know, you leave school, you go your own way. You know, I got into working in business and in telecoms, and I put it to the back of my mind for a while, to be honest with you. And then the 1999 European Cup final took place.
What school did you go to, Rob? Because we grew up in a similar part of Birmingham. Was you BK or Sir Wilf's?
No, I was Sir Wilf's.
Yeah, got ya.
Yeah, I was the braiding, mate. I was the green braiding.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes, was you BK then?
No, I was Kingshurst, to be Gary Shaw.
You was?
Shawsey was 5th year when I went to Kingshurst, and that's where my first understanding of Gary Shaw happened at Kingshurst Juniors, when my teacher got me out of class and said, you can't play for the 4th years yet because you're a 2nd year, and the only player that's ever played 4th year football at 2nd year is Gary Shaw.
There you go.
And I thought, who's Gary Shaw? And then we went to, as you're going, because we're a similar age, you went to Wilf's in Tollcross. I went to Kingshurst, and I watched this kid, this blonde lad, on the playgrounds. And I said to my pals, who's this kid here? And I said, that's Gary Shaw. And I said, no wonder he played in the 2nd year, in the 4th year. And that pretty much was the start of your Villa love, growing up and watching Gary Shaw from the Holt end. I watched Gary Shaw from the big playground at Kingshurst Comprehensive.
Yeah, well, there you go. A little bit more personal.
Yeah, absolutely.
For your one, mate. Very personal. But yeah, that's some great times watching the Villa during that period. I mean, I could go back to the 76, 77 season.
Great
when
season.
He had Andy. Oh, it's fantastic. Swashbuckling football is what I call it. During that season, we finished 4th, and we got to the we won the League Cup, and we lost to United in the quarter-finals of the FA Cup as well. So it could have been a fantastic.
That's because Andy didn't play. Andy was injured. If Andy would have been fit for the whole of the season, you could have been writing your treble book about Villa 76, 77, because they were that good and they were that close from winning the treble. But
that's right. And then in that same year, Liverpool nearly did it as well.
Well, you see, the argument is, with the treble, has any English club ever really won the proper treble? Now, I know United did, because they won the league, they won the FA Cup against Newcastle, because that's what we're going to be talking about, and then they won that phenomenal game against Bayern Munich when, to all intents and purposes, if you turned the television off at 90 minutes, you would have gone to bed thinking Bayern would have won it. But, when you look at it, the year before, it was Arsenal that won the league. So in new money, if you finish in the top four, you go into the Champions League, but they're not champions. In the olden days, when Villa won the league, they then went into the European Cup. You had to win your own Football League Championship. So, it is a grey area, but, it is what it is. We are where we are, and United did win, but Liverpool were very close in 77 when Manchester United beat them 2-1 at Wembley.
Correct. Yeah, correct. They'd won the league. They lost the FA Cup, and then a few days later, they beat Borussia Mönchengladbach in the 77 final. So, yeah, they were very, very close.
Because again, in them days, the games were close as well, wasn't they? You'd have the FA Cup, and then it was pretty much on to the European Cup. And I think that's what happened with Manchester United. They beat Newcastle at Wembley 2-0, Paul Scholes, and my favourite player of that era, Teddy Sheringham. And then on the Wednesday after, they met Bayern Munich. But let's go back to the beginning of that season. Arsenal were the champions. Manchester United, it was the class of 92, plus a few other players. Roy Keane was the main man. But in that final, Keane only lasted 8 minutes, didn't he?
He did. He did. And you're quite right in what you say there, Paul, in terms of start of the 98-99 season. It did look as if, they'd handed the baton over to Arsenal, and they would be the dominant club. And in the book, they played 63 games, and I call the first one the Charity Shield.
Yes.
Against Arsenal. And Arsenal won it at a canter, 3-0. I've got quite a lot of fan contribution in the book, and all of them say that they came out of the ground that day on that Boiling Hot August season opener, and all the Arsenal fans were saying that's it. You've handed everything over to us now. You've had a good run for the last 4 or 5 years, and now it's down to us. But it was neck and neck during the season with both of them. It was a fantastic two teams, and obviously it culminated in the FA Cup semi-final, which was the turning point of the season for United, and the reason why I wrote the book in the end.
And the cup semi-final, it was a replay, wasn't it, at Villa Park?
Was a replay. They played at Villa Park on the Saturday, and then they were back on the Wednesday for it. It wasn't a great game in that first semi-final, cat and mouse, and then it just lit up in the semi-final. But it's fine lines, isn't it? Life is fine lines. Football is fine lines. If Bergkamp would have scored that penalty in the 90th minute, Arsenal would have gone through. They would have probably won the league as well. And beaten Newcastle again in the FA Cup final, but it wasn't to be. And to me, Peter Schmeichel during that game, he was the pinnacle reason, the turning point that gave Manchester United the impetus to go on and do what they did in May of that year. But he'd been vilified at the start of the season. He had intended to retire and told a few select people at Manchester United, and perhaps the fact that he hadn't told everybody else meant that he started the season in bad form, and people were saying that his career was over. But as United picked up the momentum going in from the end of 98 to 99, that is when he started to come into his own.
Wasn't that Schmeichel's last season playing for Manchester United, though, the 80...
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 98-99.
Yeah,
His last thing was to pick up the European Cup with Roy Keane suspended for the final. So it was, that was the last thing he did as a Manchester United player.
I mean, that ain't a
What a
bad.
way to bow out.
Again, when you're looking at players, I mean, what age was Schmeichel when he bowed out at United? Because he did play for Aston Villa and he did play for Manchester City. So, what age was Schmeichel then when he bowed out at United? Because it's
I think he
almost,
was about 31,
yeah,
32, mate,
mm,
when he did so, because he came to the Villa when he was about 35,
yeah, yeah.
something like that,
Mm.
and the season he was with us. So yeah, he'd had a great 8 or 9 years at Manchester United.
And again, when
And he
you
won on many points, didn't he? When you
Oh,
think about it,
absolutely. When you look at Schmeichel, you look at the star jump kind of save. He invented that, didn't he? He made
he did.
himself so big, he put, literally like a starfish coming out to forwards and frightening the lives out of
Well,
them.
he gave him a good 15 points a season, didn't he?
Oh, 100%. I mean, one of the great goalkeepers that we've seen, in modern
Totally.
times. Because, I mean, what we do tend to get caught up in. I don't get caught up in that, but lots of people do these days, and certainly the news outlets do. That football was invented in 1992, and
Mm.
when you're looking at players, it's all about the players of the modern era of the last 30 years. And if we're gonna judge players of the last 30 years, Schmeichel is one of the greats. When you look at that Manchester United side, the midfield would have been Giggs, Scholes, Keane, and Beckham. What a tremendous midfield.
It's not bad, is it?
No, and then of course the forward line would have been Yorkie and Cole and Solskjaer and Sheringham. A great four pair, any two from that four. What I found interesting about Manchester United at that time is my football club, Birmingham City, and I get into lots and lots of spats over. Yes, I am a Birmingham City supporter, and lots of Birmingham fans, especially in the Lee Clark era. There was a lot of things coming out of there, and no, that these stories can't be true because all football players get on with each other. They all love each other. No, no, no. Give your head a wobble. Players are just normal people. Football is their job, and in particular in that Manchester United side, Keane, Sheringham, Cole. There was a number of players that didn't talk, didn't like each other.
It's right. You're right. This was a job to them,
Mm.
but they just came about at the right time. And another big difference between Arsenal and Man United on that night, when in the FA Cup semi-final, was the bench, because Ferguson was able to bring on his big guns,
Mm.
and one of them was Ryan Giggs, who obviously went on to score that wonderful goal in the extra time period. So the thing about Ferguson that season was that he knew when to pick his players. He knew what his best 11 was, but he knew how to keep everybody else happy and
Yeah.
on their toes as well. And it worked perfect as they got to those last 3 games of the season. But the reason why I wrote the book, Paul, is because it fascinates me beyond anything that,
Mm.
a football team can win 3 games on the trot. Every single football team is capable of doing that, and often do. But the thing that gets me about that treble winning season was they played 60 games, including the Charity Shield. They played 60 games and won nothing. They could have
Mm. Yeah.
left the season with absolutely nothing at all. And yet, game 61, they win the league. Game 62, they win the FA Cup. And then game 63, they win the Champions League as well. And they do it in the final seconds of the game. And that was the big thing about United that season. They just never knew when to give up. I'll go back to the first game of the season, because in the book, there's a couple of chapters called Red or Dead.
Yeah.
Red being United doing well, or the dead part is that they didn't do too well. So the first game I pick is the Arsenal 3, Manchester United 0 in the Charity Shield, and everybody's going, right, that's it now. Wenger's going to do it again and all that kind of stuff. But even in that first home game of the season, they played Leicester City and were 2 down with around 12 minutes to go. And Messrs Beckham and Sheringham score goals. And that they get back in the game. They didn't win it, but they drew 2-2. But there's so many examples of them coming from behind. Liverpool in the FA Cup 4th round is a good example. So they never did it the easy way at all. Juventus in the semi-final of the Champions League. It's just, to me, Manchester United in that 9-month period depict the greatest of sporting excellence. And you know what? You can take what they did, and this is something I've tried to get across in the book. It's life itself as well, Paul. You never give in. You follow your dream, and sometimes they become reality. And in the face of adversity, which is something that United experienced a few times, they came through. Their last game that they lost was December 98, when they lost 2-0 at home to Middlesbrough. And then they never lost another game after that. Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. But, Liverpool could have won the quadruple last season. In the end, they didn't come very close to it. They came close to winning the treble in 76-77 season, as we've said. But it's how United did it as well. Winning, and you pick up 3 of the greatest trophies that any club in this country and in Europe can have. It's only been done a few times as well. So it was just an amazing time. The backdrop was that they were looking to be sold as well.
United are the only team to have won the treble, aren't they, in this country?
In England, yes.
Yeah.
Celtic have done it.
Yes, yeah.
And Ajax,
Yeah.
Barcelona, Bayern Munich have done it, and I think Juventus have as well.
Yeah.
So it has happened, but I'd
not in this country.
I'd wager the emotion. What depicts football. Nothing will be like what Manchester United endured in that season. And part of the reason why I wanted to write the book is that I wanted it from a fan's point of view as well.
Yeah.
So I wanted to speak to people that had gone to the game. So I'd met them. I Zoomed calls with them. We did it on the phone like we're doing now and all that kind of stuff. And the stories were just absolutely fantastic. I went through the emotions with them. I felt like I'd been there with them. From the first games of the season right through to the end. They're just stories, brilliant football stories that will make you cry and laugh at the same time.
How many contributions did you have, Rob?
I had about 8 or 9 in the end.
Yeah.
I had about 8 or 9 fans that had gone to the game. So it was just totally wonderful, and that was the biggest thing in the book, to ensure that what they experienced, during that period of time, I captured it properly for them, and I've had nothing but good feedback from them.
Good.
So it's that was important to me, and I had the likes of Clive Tilsley, who obviously did the legendary commentary that day.
Yeah.
I've had some great contributions from him. Steve Bruce had given me some. It did a great forward for me as well, as did Neil Custis from The Sun, who incidentally became the chief correspondent for The Sun for them in the summer of 1999.
I bet he was torn, wasn't he? That Geordie boy.
yes, exactly. But he'd gone to the final and was in the press box, but he'd gone there not to work. It was a bit of a busman's holiday for him. And he found his then girlfriend up on the morning after in Barcelona and said, I want to cover this. and then I think it was a guy called Peter Fitton retired, and he got the job, and he's
Wow.
been there ever since. So it's just, I've had some fantastic stories. The players have given me a bit as well, as and when they can. But
What
I
players
just,
have contributed, Rob?
but as I said, I've got Steve Bruce.
Yeah.
I've got some smaller quotes from other players as well.
Hmm.
Roy Keane is in there. It's just bits that I've been able to pick up as well. So and obviously acknowledge. So it's been a great, how can I put it, across the board view from the from the people with the mics to the people with their football boots on to the fans. It's just just a marvelous story.
And
So that goes on all through the book.
And have you found it being because with these books, generally speaking, I think Neil Custis is a great example. And for me, I always believe that you should write, if you're a professional, you're a journalist, you should write your love is football, but not about your own club, because I think you can get too close to your own club. So writing about other clubs, and then you get that information from the fans, from people that are around the football club, some of the players, etc. I think you get an even greater bonding and an even greater satisfaction in your production when you do something that's not so close to home, but very close to your
So,
heart.
totally true, mate. Totally true. That's exactly what I found. I'd had this story in my head almost after that final whistle because of the way that they won those 3 games. And I always said I wanted fan contribution,
Mm.
but I just kept it in my head. And then we had lockdown, and then I thought, yeah, it's time now to do the book. So yeah, I did a lot of research, spoke to a lot of people. I got nothing but respect for the Manchester United fans that I spoke to. They were just absolutely wonderful with me. And another reason why I wrote the book, Paul, as well, if I may, is that I've wrote it in association with prostate cancer,
Yeah.
who again donations from the book as well. And the reason for that is that my dad had prostate cancer, and he'd recovered from it, but he decided to go on to their I'll call it guinea pig for want of a better word, for the drug trials.
Yeah.
And at times, mate, it really messed him up.
Mm.
But he always said, I want to do it because of the fact that I'm allowing people down the line to have a better quality of life.
Yeah.
And I went to him about 18 months ago and said, look, I'm thinking about doing this. And he went, son, write the first chapter and bring it back so I can have a look at it. So I did exactly that, Paul. I wrote it, typed it up, took it to him, sat there. I was like being at an interview when he was reading it, and he put his glasses on and he read it. 15 minutes later, he puts the paper down, takes his glasses off, and he says, son, you've got to write this. And I just smiled at him and I went, Dad, if I do it, I'm going to get prostate cancer involved. He said, do that. That would be a lovely touch. So I got prostate cancer involved, and a couple of weeks later, Dad passed away.
Oh dear.
But he will. But and it's the biggest cancer killer in men.
Mm.
So for me to have it in honor of my dad, and knowing that prostate cancer are involved in it, and they've got a bit in the book as well where they write about what they're trying to do with the charity. So it was just wonderful, and the book is dedicated to my dad as well, along with those that perished in Munich in 1958 as well.
Yeah, I mean, what a lovely
So I'll
touch.
make it poignant.
Yeah, and again, what a great touch. United European Cup winners in '68, 10 years after Munich, and in 1999. Ferguson, you mentioned fine margins. I do a podcast with Huddy, and we always talk about how instrumental management is. And when Fergie walked into those gates there at Old Trafford, it wasn't all plain sailing, and he was arguably a game away, that replay against, what was it, Crystal Palace?
No, not it was Nottingham Forest, and
Was
I'm
it
glad you
Nottingham
mentioned.
Forest? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you've mentioned this because I wanted the centrepiece to be those 3 games in May, hence why it's
Mm,
titled that. But I wanted to go back 10 years before and 10 years after.
yeah.
And it starts off with the FA Cup draw in December 1989, where Forest are drawn at home to Manchester United. It was chosen as one of the live games of the BBC that weekend in January when we do that 3rd round. And, you know, the general consensus was he loses this and he's out of a job.
God, yeah.
And they won 1-0 through Mark Robbins. But what people forget is that in the next round, they played Hereford away. And that was another banana skin where he could have lost his job. But they won 1-0 with Clayton Blackmore in the 84th minute. And then they started to build momentum from that moment onwards. And they never played at Old Trafford once during that campaign. It was away games all the way through to the final. So, you know, that the FA Cup effectively kept him in his job. But in Ferguson's mind, he wanted to be top of the tree in the league. But he knew that he had to have a couple of seasons where they weren't quite good enough to do so.
Mm.
And then they win the European Cup Winners' Cup the following season, and then they win the League Cup for the first time in '92. And then, as you know, that's when he built his first great teams, when, especially during the 93-94 season, when he's brought in Roy Keane. He's got that talisman called Eric Cantona. And that was the first great team that he built. Second being the 98-99. And then I would say arguably the best team was 10 years later, when they beat Chelsea in the 2008 Champions League final. They were far more European during then. But, you know, fair credit to the Manchester United board, where Fergie wouldn't be afforded the time now if he'd been manager right now.
No.
But they stuck with him, and, you know, he started to win trophies after a good 4 or 5 years. There's quite a lot of similarities between their last trophy was in '85 when they beat Everton in the FA Cup final. Then their next trophy is beating Crystal Palace in 1990. So that's a 5-year gap. This year with Eric Ten Hag, it's a 6-year gap. So who knows whether history will repeat itself. But, you know, he built 3 great dynasties, and I wanted that to be, you know, the message of that being brought across as well, that, you know, football doesn't have to be trigger happy. There, you know, there is a long-term project that people are looking at, and United, you know, their board, with Martin Edwards and all those guys, you know, they kept him because they believed in him, and look what they received back from 1990 all the way through to 2013 when he retired. So yeah, it goes back to 1989 and it goes forward to 2009 as well. So, you know, it does that. I also feature what was going on in the world as well in 98-99. So, you know, not just whilst United were going on this fantastic run, but what was going on around them in the world as well. So I've made it as open as I can do. But, you know, we're starting to get the reviews for it. It comes out on the 21st of March, which incidentally is a day, is exactly a year since my dad died. So it's quite poignant that we're doing that. So, yeah, it's all systems go, mate. I'm very, very proud of it. Whether you're a Man United fan or not, it's just a great story of a team coming together, being managed by one of the greatest managers of all time, and what they did during that time as well. It was never easy for them, like I said. So it's just a fantastic story. I don't think we will ever have that again.
I don't think we'll. Yeah, I don't think we'll ever have a dominant force like Manchester United again, because the way that football is today, it's completely different to as it was back then. I mean, Ferguson took over from Ron after the 1986 World Cup finals, and Fergie was afforded the luxury of buying players that Big Ron wasn't. Big Ron wanted to buy Terry Butcher, for instance. I think he wanted to partner him with Paul McGrath. Big Ron had got big ideas, but the Man United board at the time didn't share his ideas. However, when Ferguson walked in there, I do remember they spent some big transfer fees. I think Robbo went there, didn't he? Remy Moses went there. There was a lot of £1 million plus players going to Old Trafford. And I remember at the time a lot of people were saying he spent an awful lot of money, Ferguson, and nothing's really happening. He ain't far away from the sack, hence the conversation a few minutes earlier. So he was on a dodgy wicket, but the Man United board did stand the ground and did, have the confidence of Ferguson. And as you say, the rest is history. And I think it's a great lesson for the modern day that if you do believe in a manager, Arsenal I think have done very well quite recently with
They have.
with the fellow they were going to sack him not
Exactly.
too long ago, but Arteta now has come good and he might be bringing silverware to the Emirates. So football is a funny game. You've just got to let it bed in at times.
Correct. Can I do the plug-in now of the book as well, where they can, where your listeners can?
You certainly can. And also, before we talk about the European final, because I want to talk about that
Yeah.
night in Barcelona, your publishers as well, because without them, the book doesn't arrive on people's doorsteps, does it? Through the letterboxes that
No,
they're going to order from.
no. I've gone with a publisher called Morgan Lawrence. Two guys, Matt and Barry, that run the show there. I pitched it to them. We went through various scenarios, and they've been nothing but supportive on that. So they're getting busy for all the pre-orders that are going out now. And if any of your listeners want to buy the book, which is at $15.99 with donations made to prostate cancer, all they need to do is go to www.morganlawrence.co.uk, and all the details will be on there. So yeah, I'm very pleased with my publishers. They've gone through every step with me, and we've gone through all the doubts and the hardship and all that, and we're coming out the other end, and we're all gearing for hopefully a good book for people to read.
And let's talk about Barcelona, that balmy night. Bayern Munich 1, Manchester United 2. But at 90 minutes, it was Bayern Munich 1, Manchester United 0. It was an incredible final. It was time added on, wasn't it, that they scored, and both goals from a corner.
It was, as you quite rightly say, Bayern took the lead in the first 6 minutes. I think he was on the 6th minute when they scored, and then there was no more goals until, as you quite rightly say, the injury time part. But if you remember, Bayern had hit the post, had some really good chances in the last 20 minutes or so to put the game, beyond the reach of United. And I remember watching it on TV, and I'm thinking United are going to win this,
Did you?
because
Oh,
yeah,
never.
I did, and the general consensus of the fans in there is that is our name on this trophy. The Bayern have missed some great chances. So yes, you're quite right. They score a couple of minutes into injury time, and that first one is scored by Teddy Sheringham, across by David Beckham, as we know. Peter Schmeichel had gone up for that one. In fact, he got his head to the ball as the ball came across. Yorkie will testify to that in one of the books that he's written, because he remembers it skimming off his head. and then goes back into goal. But when he's going up for the corner, it's quite funny, really, because Fergie and Steve McLaren, who was his number 2 at that time, were going, "What's he doing coming up for this?" But, he played his part in it, and then he goes back to the goal. And when they go back to the centre circle to kick off, you've got Ollie and Sheringham going, "This is great. We've got another half hour of this."
Mm.
And then, Beckham puts that corner in. Sheringham flicks the ball on, and Ollie's there to put his foot out, and it goes high into the net, and they've won 2-1. It's absolutely amazing. But there's a great story in the book by one of the guys who was also one of the stewards on the night from Manchester United, and he'd been told to leave the game on 85 minutes effectively to get back to the coaches, so he can make sure that the fans get back in time. And he's going out the gate. He sees none other than George Best.
Blimey.
And Best would go, "Yeah, we've lost this now," and whatever. And I need to find the nearest bar, basically, is what George Best said to one of my contributors. And then they hear this roar. My contributor gets a text on his phone off his son, who's still in the stadium. "We've scored, Dad. We've equalised." So he's dragged George Best back, and he's dragged them all back in, thinking, "We're going to have another half hour, so we can't go to our coaches yet." And as they're walking back through, the second goal goes in. So then they have to go back out again and think. But I mean, it's just wonderful stories like that. The United fans that I spoke to, they didn't really see that second goal because they were still celebrating the fact that they got back into the game. So it's just a wonderful sporting story, which whether you like Manchester United or not, it's just true sporting excellence, mate.
Absolutely.
Really is.
I mean, I love all football. It doesn't matter whether it's my team or anybody else's team. I love to see, some of these monumental occasions and trebles and doubles, and it doesn't matter what it is in football. And I think it's fantastic that you've got publishing companies that are giving authors like yourself, Rob, the blank canvas, if you like, to contribute and get supporters' views and players' views and stick it on your book, and then the games and that season are never forgotten because they're there in the memory banks. It's okay, you can go onto YouTube and you can talk to your mate down the pub, but to read it in a book and open the book and you've got it there in black and white, I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Well, I hope the readers enjoy the stories from the fans, because that really is the crux of it. You and I have stood on the terraces. We didn't get on the pitch, to play in these big games, but we stood on the terraces and we had our mates there, and we've got our own stories. But to hear the Man United fans talk about it, it's just wonderful, mate. Just totally wonderful.
Absolutely, and you've got another couple of books out, and one, Sean Teal, you've been working with Sean, and the League Cup as well.
That's for next year. The Sean Teal book comes out later on this year. I've had a great 3 or 4 months working with him on the book. Again, it's down to Morgan Lawrence, so I'm working with those guys again on the book. And yes, I'm working on the history of the League Cup. So it's a season by season of every single final in the 20th century. And then I'm picking the best of the 21st century as well. And of course, probably the most important final, although it grieves me to say it, obviously, is when you guys won it in 2011.
Do you think so? Why?
It was a massively important game, Paul, and I'll tell you why, right? You mentioned the 1992 being the start of football as we know it with Sky. Every final that the Sky Six got involved in, was won by them. The only one was Everton versus Man United in the 1995 FA Cup final. Then, you know, every time United got to a final, Arsenal got to a final, they won them. So there was no shocks like we'd had with Luton in the League Cup,
Yeah.
Oxford,
Milk Cup. Yeah.
Southampton, West Ham winning the FA Cup. There was with no real shocks. And I know Portsmouth won it in 2008, but they were the first division club. And I think the team they played was Cardiff, who were a championship team at the time.
Yeah.
Birmingham were not favourites in any way, shape, or form, and won it. And to me, it's the most important cup win since the shocks of Wimbledon and Luton and all those guys. I really do think that. And the season after, Wigan did it to Man City in the FA Cup final, and it's not been done since. You know, Swansea won it a couple of years later, but they beat a fourth division team or an old fourth division team in Bradford in the final. So yes, that part will be a big contribution from Birmingham fans, and I'll obviously be coming to you for it as well, sir.
Yes, I've tried my best. I've put a few heads towards your way that played in major finals in the 70s.
Yep, I've got some great stories coming up, so thank you for that, sir. I do appreciate it.
And going back to Dwight York, did you get any contribution from John Gregory? Because he was the manager at Aston Villa when Dwight York got transferred to Manchester United, wasn't he? He wasn't very happy at the time, was he, John?
He wasn't. It's a good job he never had a gun at the time. Can you imagine that being said now?
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? You can't even call a bloke a bloke these
Gary
days.
Lineker off that top spot.
Oh, dear me.
All day long today, if you'd have said that, most definitely. But we never batted an eyelid, did we?
No, because we were proper people back in them days. You know, John Gregory, if I got a gun, I'd shoot the bastard.
That's what I mean.
But it didn't actually mean that he was going to get the gun and shoot him.
Of course he never.
But that's what people say. That's what football people used to say and certainly think back in our day. It didn't happen, of course, but that's what it was. It was a different world. I think it was a better world. We said what we thought, and we didn't have social media jump on our backs and wanting to take us to task. And you shouldn't be saying that. You can't call him that. You can't. You know, you can call anybody what you liked in our day. We were big enough. We were bold enough, we were brave enough to take it on board, and you say, you know, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And I think the kids could take a big part out of that phrase, because that's what I've always lived my life by.
Can you imagine, mate? Can you imagine that if Gregory said this today?
Oh, it would be
your social media feeds.
Oh, dear me.
Would be absolutely full, mate. It would be full. But that is mentioned in the book as well.
I'd love John to go on his socials and say that about Yorkie.
Well, I also host events for the Villa. Excuse me, mate. Down by the coast as well, because I live down here now.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that John Gregory will be there one day, so I'll ask him that very question. But if you remember, none of us. It wasn't even a conversation piece in the pub.
No.
You see what Gregory said?
No,
typical John.
Yeah. But again,
that was it.
That's what it would be. Typical John. But you had managers that would say it like that back in the... It was before, you know, the Sky TV, the BBC, the media savvy football industry got its claws into it, and it's now such a sterile place where journalists can't talk to players are very away from it. You get the mix zone. You'll be lucky if you get a chat with a player. In those days, everything was open. The journalists would travel on the trains or the planes to the games with the players, and there was there was a togetherness within that football club, and now it's not, and it's a worse place for it, mate, in my opinion. But there you go.
I'll have my final word on this part, Paul. right? In our day, you could be in your local pub, and and the footballer who plays around your area would be in there.
Gary Shaw, when I was working at Bradford,
That's right.
absolutely.
You know, you'd often see, and I mean, I never went up to them because I didn't want to. You know, they were out of work as far as I was concerned. But sorry, mate. But nowadays, if they come into your local pub, there'd be about 10 people in before them, part of their entourage, looking around, making sure. So it's you know, that footballers back in those days were one or two rungs on the social rung above us, but they were approachable. Now it's a completely different ball game. When I speak to some of the ambassadors, that ex-pros that, you know, do ambassador work at their clubs, they can't get in with the new players. You know, they're just not allowed anywhere near them. And it's a shame, but there you go, Paul. That's what it's all about.
It is, because a lot of the ambassadors, the players of these days, you know, aren't good enough to lace their boots.
Well,
But,
there you go.
you know, that's the way it is. But yeah, I used to work in pubs and clubs in Birmingham, and had many a time, it's certainly with my team, Birmingham City Hoppy and those boys up and down Broad Street.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
happy memories. I mean, you know, you wouldn't get it today. And of course, going back to as we started with Gary Shaw, Shawsy would always go in the Bradford. I'd often see
Yeah,
Gary in there. He'd been there, he'd
yeah,
have a shandy.
exactly. Yeah,
To be fair,
exactly.
it's the only time I know Shawsy not drink proper alcohol. It was always a shandy in them days.
Well, there
But
you go.
but
There you go.
a man of the people, and just a working class kid that made good, which is what all them players, and up to really 1999, you know, them players were.
Ex- exactly.
But
Yeah,
then it
exactly.
but then it changed when the
It did.
millennium clicked over. Something a little bit like with 1992, 93 with the Premier League, the millennium bang changed everything, and
That's another story for another time, mate.
let's try and
Definitely.
turn the hands of time back. But thank you so much, Rob, for your contribution, for your book. Can I wish you all the very best, and we will reconvene with your next book that's coming
Yeah,
out.
we'll get Teely on the show as well for you. But can I just tell people again, the book is called Three Games in May. It's written in association with prostate cancer, and you can get it from local bookshops, but go to Morgan Lawrence and get straight from them because they're fantastic. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Paul.
Cheers, pal. All the best, mate.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.
Speak soon, and thanks for listening, guys. Cheers, Rob.
God bless.
Bye bye, mate. Bye bye.